The huge alien ship hung in Earth's sky like a dark cloud. It had appeared 3 days ago, and the world was still in shock. The ship belonged to the Dacic Empire, a race that ruled hundreds of star systems. Captain Handa looked up at the view screen in the military base. As Korea's top soldier, he had been chosen to meet these aliens. He stood straight in his crisp uniform, his face calm even though his heart beat fast. "Captain, are you ready?" General Park asked, his old face lined with worry. "Yes, sir," Han said, checking his simple dress uniform one last time. No weapons were allowed at this meeting. The world's leaders had agreed to appear peaceful. The transport ship rose from Earth toward the massive Dacic vessel. Han sat quietly, watching his home grow smaller below. He had fought in wars, led secret missions, and faced death many times. But nothing had prepared him for this. "We're docking now," the pilot said. Han took a deep breath. The fate of Earth might depend on what happened next. The airlock opened with a hiss. Han stepped into a large room with walls that seemed to be made of living metal. The air smelled strange, like cinnamon and ozone. 4 aliens waited for him. They stood tall, almost 7 feet high, with blue-gray skin that shimmered in the light. Their 4 arms hung at their sides, and their eyes, 3 of them set in triangular faces, blinked slowly. The one in the middle wore a crown-like object that pulsed with soft light. This had to be King Taejo, ruler of the Dacic Empire. "So," Taejo said, his voice surprisingly deep and perfect in English, "this is what humans send to meet us. Small and soft, like all your kind." Han kept his face blank. "I am Captain Handai of Earth. I bring greetings from our world." Taejo walked around Han, looking at him like a scientist might study an insect. His movement was fluid but heavy, as if each step took effort. "Our scans of your world show such weakness," Taejo said. "Your bodies break easily. Your lives are short. Yet you have survived and built cities. Curious." "We have our strengths," Han said simply. Taejo laughed, a sound like rocks falling. "Yes, you think so. We have studied your history. You fight each other constantly. So much violence from such fragile creatures." The king waved one of his 4 hands, and a screen appeared in the air. It showed scenes from human wars, ancient battles with swords, modern conflicts with guns, soldiers fighting in forests and deserts. "Your kind interests me," Taejo said. "You should have destroyed yourselves long ago. Yet here you are, reaching for the stars." Han watched the alien king carefully. There was something in his manner, a mix of curiosity and contempt that made Han uneasy. "Why have you come to Earth?" Han asked. "To satisfy my curiosity," Taejo said, "and to claim what is ours by right of strength. The Dacic Empire expands. Always. It is our way." The room grew quiet. Han felt cold despite the warm air. "We prefer to live in peace," Han said. "We can offer trade, knowledge." "Peace," Taejo interrupted, "is for equals. And we are not equals, little human." The other Dacic shifted, their hands moving to devices at their sides. Not weapons, but something that made Han's skin prickle with warning. "My king finds you amusing," one of the other aliens said. "That is the only reason you still stand free. Be grateful." Han stood taller. Earth will not surrender without a fight. Taejo's 3 eyes blinked slowly, one after another. Then his mouth stretched in what might have been a smile. "A fight." He said, "Yes, that would be interesting. Very interesting indeed." Han knew then that the real test was just beginning. 2 days after the first meeting, Captain Han stood in the United Nations building in New York. Leaders from all over Earth had gathered to hear what the aliens wanted. The room was tense and quiet. A large screen showed King Taejo sitting on his throne aboard the Dacic ship. His 3 eyes looked down at the humans with cold interest. "People of Earth," Taejo said, his voice filling the room, "I have studied your planet and decided its fate." Han felt the fear in the room grow. He kept his face calm, but his hands tightened at his sides. The Dacic Empire claims all worlds we find, Taizhou continued. This is our right as the strongest race in the galaxy. But you humans interest me. You are weak, yet you survive. You fight well, for such soft creatures. President Kim of South Korea leaned toward Han and whispered, I don't like where this is going. Taizhou spread his 4 arms wide. So I offer a choice. Surrender now and become part of our empire as servants. Or, he paused, his mouth forming that strange not quite smile, prove yourselves worthy of respect. What do you mean by prove? Asked the Secretary General. A challenge, Taizhou said. 1 warrior from Earth against my champion, Commander Ryuk. 3 trials to test strength, endurance, and combat skill. The screen changed to show another Dacic. Ryuk was even larger than Taizhou, with scars across his blue-gray skin. All 4 of his massive arms ended in hands that looked strong enough to crush stone. If your champion wins, Earth stays free, Taizhou said. If not, you serve the Empire. The room burst into angry voices. Han watched the alien king, seeing the trap in his words. The Dacic were 3 times stronger than humans. This was not a fair challenge. It was a game where Taizhou had all the advantages. We need time to discuss this, the Secretary General said. You have 1 Earth day, Taizhou replied. The screen went dark. Hours later, after heated debate, the world's leaders were still arguing. Some wanted to fight with all Earth's weapons. Others thought surrender might save lives. We can't win a space war, General Park said. Their technology is too advanced. And we can't win this challenge either, said the Russian delegate. Look at the size of their champion. Han, who had been quiet until now, stood up. I will face the challenge. Everyone turned to look at him. Captain Han, it's suicide, President Kim said. The Dacic are much stronger than humans. Yes, Han agreed, but they have weaknesses too. He walked to the center of the room and pulled up images taken during the first meeting. Look at how they move, he said. Heavy steps, slow turns. Their muscles are strong but work against gravity stronger than ours. And notice their breathing, deep and slow. They have poor endurance. The room grew quiet as Han continued. I studied our scans. The Dacic need more rest than humans. They evolved on a world with longer days and stronger gravity. They're built for power, not stamina. Even so, the Chinese premier said, the odds are not good. Han nodded. The odds are bad, but fighting gives us a chance. Surrender gives us none. General Park stood beside Han. If anyone can do this, it's Captain Han. His record in Special Forces is perfect. He's our best fighter. President Kim looked at Han with sad eyes. Are you sure about this? No, Han admitted. But I believe humans are stronger than the Dacic think. King Taizhou sees only our physical weakness. He doesn't understand what we can do when pushed to our limits. The Secretary General called for a vote. Most hands rose in support of Han's plan. That night, Han sent a message to the Dacic ship. Earth accepts your challenge. I, Captain Handai, will face your champion. The reply came minutes later. Just 4 words. Prepare to be defeated. Han looked out his window at the stars. We'll see, he whispered. The old training hall was quiet except for the sound of Han's hard breathing. He had been working for 6 hours straight. His body ached, but he pushed harder. He had only 1 week to prepare. Master Suk watched from the side of the room. The old man had trained Han since he was a boy. His hair was white now, his face lined with age, but his eyes missed nothing. Again, Master Suk said, faster this time. Han nodded and repeated the complex series of moves. His muscles burned, but each movement was perfect. Years of training had made his body a weapon. Good, Master Suk said, but strength alone will not win against the Dacic. You must be smarter than them. Han grabbed a towel and wiped his face. Their champion is 3 times stronger than me. Yes. The old man agreed. But a tiger does not fight a bear with the bear's methods. It uses its own strengths. The door opened, and Dr. Junei entered. She carried a tablet with the latest data on the Daisic. As Earth's top xenobiologist, she had been studying the aliens since they arrived. "I have news," she said. Her face was serious, but her eyes were kind when she looked at Han. They had known each other for years, and she worried for him. Han sat down as she showed him the screen. "The Daisic homeworld has gravity 1.8 times Earth's," she explained. "They evolved to be strong, but they use a lot of energy. They need to eat often and rest between activities." Master Suk nodded. "This confirms what we suspected. Endurance is their weakness." "There's more," Dr. Ju said. "Their reaction time is slower than ours. About 0.4 seconds slower. Not much, but in a fight, it could matter." Han thought about this. "So I need to move fast and make the fights last long. Wear them down." "Yes," Master Suk said, "but be careful. One hit from those arms could break bones." They spent the next hours planning. Han would need different strategies for each of the 3 trials. For the strength test, perfect technique would be key. For endurance, conserving energy. For combat, speed and smarts over power. Meanwhile, the world watched and waited. Some people called Han a hero. Others said he was foolish to face the alien champion. Everyone was afraid. In space, more Daisic ships had arrived. They circled Earth like hungry wolves. If Han failed, they would attack. On the 5th day, Han received a message from King Taejo. "My champion wishes to see who he will defeat." That afternoon, Han went to a neutral meeting place, a space station between Earth and the Daisic fleet. Commander Ryuk was already there when Han arrived. The alien was even more impressive in person, nearly 8 feet tall with massive shoulders and arms like tree trunks. Scars covered his blue-gray skin, showing he had won many fights. "This is the human champion," Ryuk asked, his 3 eyes blinking one after another. "So small." Han stood straight and looked up at Ryuk without fear. "Size isn't everything." Ryuk laughed, a deep rumbling sound. "I have defeated champions from 17 worlds. None were as weak as you. Maybe they all tried to match your strength," Han said. "That would be a mistake." "And what will you do differently, little human?" Ryuk asked. Han smiled but didn't answer. Ryuk leaned down, his face close to Han's. "It doesn't matter. In 2 days, you will know true defeat." "We'll see," Han said quietly. As he left the meeting, Han felt the weight of his task. The alien was right about one thing. Han had never faced anything like this before, but neither had Ryuk ever faced a human pushed to the limit. That night, Han couldn't sleep. He stood at his window, looking at the stars and the dark shapes of the Daisic ships. Tomorrow would be his last day of preparation. Then the challenge would begin. Earth was counting on him. He could not fail. The day of the first trial arrived. Han stood on the main deck of the Daisic royal ship. The room was huge, with high ceilings and walls that changed color. Hundreds of aliens watched from raised seats, their 6-fingered hands moving in excitement. King Taejo sat on a floating throne at one end of the room. He wore a shining suit of armor that made him look bigger than before. "Welcome, human," Taejo said. "Today you will see the difference between our kinds." Han said nothing. He wore a simple black training suit. Behind him, on a small screen, he could see people watching from Earth. Billions of humans were holding their breath. Commander Ryuk entered from the other side of the room. The crowd roared. He raised all 4 arms, showing his muscles to his people. "The first trial tests strength," King Taejo announced. "Each champion will lift a series of weights. Whoever lifts the most wins." Han had expected this. The Daisic would want to start with what they were best at. A platform rose from the floor. On it were metal cubes of different sizes. "Begin with the smallest," ordered the king. The first cube was easy. Both Han and Ryuk lifted it without trouble. The second and third were the same. But the fourth cube was very heavy. Han felt his muscles strain as he lifted it. Sweat ran down his face, but he remembered Master Suk's lessons on form and leverage. He planted his feet just right, kept his back straight, and used his whole body, not just his arms. The cube came up. The humans watching on Earth cheered. Ryuk lifted the same cube easily with just 2 of his arms. The Dasik crowd made clicking sounds that might have been laughter. The 5th cube was a real challenge. Han knew he was at his limit. This cube weighed more than anything he had ever lifted. But he had to try. He bent down, gripped the handles, and took a deep breath. Then he pulled with everything he had. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the cube began to rise. Han's face turned red. His arms shook. But inch by inch, the cube came up until it was at waist level. That was all he could do. He held it there for 3 seconds, then had to set it down. The Dasik seemed surprised. They had not expected the human to lift this much. Then it was Ryuk's turn. The alien champion picked up the cube with 3 arms and held it high above his head, showing off. "The 6th cube will end this contest," King Taejo said, looking pleased. The 6th cube was massive. Han knew at once he could not lift it. Still, he had to try. He bent down, gripped the handles, and pulled with all his might. The cube moved a tiny bit, but would not leave the ground. After a full minute of trying, Han stepped back, breathing hard. As expected, King Taejo said, "Now, Ryuk, show the human what real strength is." Ryuk approached the cube. He used all 4 arms, grunted with effort, and lifted the cube to his chest. The Dasik crowd went wild. "The first trial goes to the Dasik," King Taejo announced. As it should. Han bowed his head, seeming defeated, but inside, he was calm. He had done better than the aliens expected. He had shown them humans were not as weak as they thought. King Taejo came down from his throne and walked to Han. "You see now, human, you cannot win." Han looked up at the alien king. "The contest isn't over. There are 2 more trials." "Yes," Taejo said, "2 more chances for you to fail." Han smiled slightly. "Or 2 more chances to surprise you." Taejo's 3 eyes narrowed. For the first time, the alien king looked a little uncertain. "The second trial will be tomorrow," he said. "Prepare yourself for more disappointment." As Han left the ship to return to Earth, he thought about what he had learned. The Dasik were indeed very strong, but they were also proud and quick to underestimate humans. That might be useful in the trials to come. The next day, Han stood on a strange planet. The Dasik had brought him to a small moon that circled their ship. The air was thin but breathable. The ground was rough with sharp rocks and red dust. "This is the site of our second trial," King Taejo announced. He stood with his court, watching from a safe platform. A test of endurance. Han looked across at Ryuk. The alien champion seemed fully recovered from yesterday. His blue-gray skin gleamed in the weak sunlight. "Each of you will be given basic supplies," Taejo continued. "You must survive for 3 days on this moon. The one who travels the farthest distance while staying alive wins." Han nodded. This was the trial he had been waiting for. Endurance was a human strength. Guards gave each fighter a small pack with water, some food tablets, and basic tools. Then a loud horn sounded, and the trial began. Ryuk immediately set off at a fast pace, moving across the rocky ground with big steps. Han went more slowly, saving his energy. He checked his supplies carefully and made a plan. The food was enough for maybe 1 day, the water for 2 if he was careful. He would need to find more of both. By midday, Ryuk was far ahead, just a small shape on the horizon. Han kept his steady pace. He remembered his special forces training in deserts and mountains. "The tortoise beats the hare," Master Suk always said. As the first day ended, Han found a small cave for shelter. He ate only half a food tablet and took small sips of water. Through his portable viewer, he could see that Ryuk had covered twice the distance Han had. But the alien was eating and drinking much more. On the second day, the weather turned bad. Strong winds blew the red dust everywhere. Han covered his face with a cloth and kept moving. His legs ached, but he forced himself forward step by step. Through the viewer, he saw that Ryuk had slowed down. The alien was stopping more often, looking tired. At this rate, Han would catch up by the end of the day. Near sunset, Han found a small pool of water hidden under some rocks. He filtered it with a tool from his pack and refilled his bottle. This was lucky. His water had been almost gone. When night came, Han checked the viewer again. Ryuk had stopped completely. The alien was resting in a makeshift shelter, and he looked weak. His forearms hung limply at his sides. The Dasik are burning too much energy, Han said to himself, just as Dr. Ju predicted. The third day dawned clear and cold. Han was tired, but still strong. He had saved his resources and managed his energy. Now he increased his pace. By midday, he had caught up to Ryuk. The alien was struggling forward, his steps slow and heavy. His supplies were gone, and his blue-gray skin had a dull, dry look. Han walked past him without a word, keeping his eyes on the path ahead. How? Ryuk gasped. How are you still strong? Humans evolved to run down prey over long distances, Han explained. Our bodies are made for this. Ryuk tried to follow, but after a few more steps, he fell to his knees. I cannot continue, he said. When the horn sounded at the end of the third day, Han had traveled almost twice as far as Ryuk. The alien champion had to be carried back to the ship by guards. King Taejo was silent as the officials announced Han as the winner of the second trial. The score was now tied. 1 win for each champion. The human got lucky, Taejo finally said. The conditions favored his kind. Han didn't argue, but he saw that some of the other Dasik were looking at him differently now. With respect, perhaps even a little fear. The final trial will be combat, Taejo announced. Tomorrow, we will see who is truly superior. As Han returned to Earth to rest, he knew the hardest test was still to come. But for the first time, he felt real hope. The Dasik were strong, but they had weaknesses, and now they knew that humans were stronger than they looked. Earth still had a chance. The final day of the challenge arrived. The score stood at 1 win each. Today's combat trial would decide Earth's fate. Han stood at the entrance to a huge arena on the Dasik ship. Inside, the aliens had built a fighting space that looked like Earth. There were trees, rocks, a small stream, and even a patch of desert. The ceiling was so high it seemed like a real sky. Impressed, King Taejo asked from behind Han. We created it based on your planet's different lands. Han nodded. It's very good. This is where you will lose, Taejo said. Combat is where the Dasik truly shine. Han said nothing. He checked his simple gear one last time. He wore light armor over his chest and back and carried basic weapons, a knife and a short fighting stick. The rules allowed each fighter to choose their own equipment. The crowd roared as Commander Ryuk entered from the other side. He wore heavy battle armor that covered his chest, shoulders, and 2 of his arms. In his other hands, he held energy weapons that glowed with blue light. Begin when the signal sounds, King Taejo said. Then he went to his throne to watch. Han took a deep breath. He had studied Ryuk's past fights. The alien always attacked straight on, using his strength and weapons to overwhelm opponents quickly. That was what Han was counting on. A loud horn sounded. The fight had begun. Ryuk charged forward, just as Han expected. The alien moved fast for his size, but still slower than a human. Han waited until the last second, then dodged to one side. Ryuk's weapons sliced through the air where Han had been standing. Han didn't try to fight back. Instead, he ran into the trees. Ryuk followed, smashing smaller trees out of his way. Coward, Ryuk shouted. Face me. But Han knew better. He used the forest to slow the bigger fighter down. He jumped over fallen logs that Ryuk had to smash through. He ducked under low branches that caught on Ryuk's armor. After 10 minutes of chase, Ryuk was breathing hard. His movements were slower, but he was still dangerous. Han led him to the stream next. The water was only knee-deep for a human, but it came halfway up Ryuk's legs. The alien had to push through it, fighting against the current. Stop running. Ryuk roared, firing his energy weapons. Blue bolts hit trees and rocks, turning them to ash. Han stayed just out of range, moving from cover to cover. He wasn't running away. He was making Ryuk work, making him use energy. 20 minutes into the fight, Han saw his chance. Ryuk stumbled on a rock in the stream. For just a moment, he was off balance. Han attacked for the first time. He ran forward, jumped onto a rock, and then leaped high, coming down on Ryuk's back. His fighting stick hit hard against the back of Ryuk's head. The alien roared in pain and spun around, but Han was already gone, disappearing back into the trees. The pattern continued. Han would hide, move, and strike when Ryuk least expected it. Small hits, nothing big, but they added up. And all the time, Ryuk was getting more tired, more angry, and more careless. The Dasik crowd grew quiet. This was not the quick victory they had expected. Their champion was being made to look slow and foolish. King Taejo stood up from his throne. Enough of this. Ryuk, finish him now. Ryuk charged again, but his movements were heavy. 40 minutes of constant movement had worn him down, just as Han had planned. Han led him to the desert area. Sand slowed the alien even more. Ryuk's breathing was now rough and loud. I will kill you. Ryuk gasped, but the threat sounded weak. Han faced him at last. No, he said simply. You won't. For the first time in the fight, Han smiled. The real battle was just beginning. Han circled Ryuk slowly. The alien champion's blue-gray skin was darker now with sweat. His breathing was heavy, and 2 of his 4 arms hung lower than before. No more running, Ryuk asked between deep breaths. No more running, Han agreed. Ryuk charged again, but he was much slower now. Han stepped aside easily and struck Ryuk's knee with his fighting stick. The alien stumbled and almost fell. The Dasik crowd was silent. Their champion was losing. You planned this, Ryuk said, his 3 eyes narrowing. Making me chase you. Han nodded. Humans are not as strong as Dasik, but we can run for hours. Our bodies are made for endurance. Yours are not. Ryuk roared and fired his energy weapons. The blue bolts missed as Han rolled away. The human was still fresh, still fast. He had saved his energy while Ryuk had wasted his. Now Han attacked for real. He moved in close, striking with quick hits and backing away before Ryuk could grab him. The alien fought back hard, but he couldn't land a solid blow on the faster human. An hour into the fight, Ryuk was breathing in gasps. One of his energy weapons had run out of power. His movements were slow and clumsy. King Taejo was no longer sitting. He stood at the edge of his box, his hands gripping the rail tightly. This was not how the fight was supposed to go. End this now, he shouted to Ryuk. But the alien champion couldn't. He was too tired. Han had worn him down just as he had planned. It's time to finish this, Han said quietly. He moved in again, but this time he didn't back away. He ducked under a wild swing from Ryuk and struck hard at the alien's legs. Ryuk stumbled to one knee. Han jumped high, using a move Master Suk had taught him years ago. His body spun in the air, and his foot caught Ryuk hard on the side of his head. The alien fell sideways, dropping his remaining weapon. The crowd gasped. Ryuk tried to stand but fell again. Han waited, his stance ready. With a final roar, Ryuk charged forward on wobbly legs. He grabbed for Han with his 4 arms, hoping to catch him in a deadly grip. Han didn't try to avoid it. Instead, he stepped into the attack. He grabbed Ryuk's right arm and used the alien's own momentum to throw him off balance. It was a basic judo move, but it worked perfectly. Ryuk's massive body flew through the air and crashed hard to the ground. The impact was so strong that the arena floor cracked. For a moment, everything was still. Then Ryuk tried to rise one last time. He made it to his hands and knees, but could go no further. "I cannot continue," he gasped. A sound like a rushing wind filled the arena as every Daisik took a sharp breath at once. "The human wins," said the official who had been watching the fight. The humans watching on screens back on Earth erupted in cheers. Captain Handai had done the impossible. He had beaten the alien champion and saved Earth. Han walked to Ryuk and offered his hand. After a moment, the alien took it and let Han help him up. "You fought well," Han said. Ryuk nodded. "As did you. I underestimated humans. We all did." King Taejo was frozen on his throne. His 3 eyes were wide with shock. His champion had lost. A mere human had defeated the Dasik's best warrior. He stood slowly and walked down to the arena floor. The crowd was silent, waiting. "Human," he said to Han, his voice tight with anger. "You have won the 3rd trial. The score is 2 victories for Earth, 1 for the Daisik." Han bowed slightly. "Then Earth remains free, as agreed." King Taejo's hands clenched at his sides. "Yes," he said, "that was our agreement." But there was something in his voice that made Han careful. He watched the king's eyes and saw the rage there. "The trial is over," Han said. "I should return to Earth now." King Taejo's mouth twisted in what might have been a smile, but there was no joy in it, only fury. "Oh no, Captain Han," the king said softly. "I don't think you'll be returning to Earth at all." "Guards!" King Taejo shouted. "Seize the human." 6 Daisik soldiers stepped forward, their weapons ready. Han had expected this. King Taejo was too proud to accept defeat. "This breaks our agreement," Han said calmly. "You promised Earth would remain free if I won." "I changed my mind," Taejo said. "No human can make a fool of the Daisik Empire and live." The guards moved closer. Han did not try to fight. He knew he couldn't beat 6 armed Daisik, especially after the long combat with Ryuk. Surprisingly, Ryuk stepped forward. "My king." The human won fairly. "Our honor." Silence. Taejo snapped. "He won by tricks, not real fighting. The Daisik way is strength, not sneaking around." Han watched the king carefully. He saw something new in the alien's eyes. Fear. Taejo was afraid of what Han's victory meant. If humans could beat Daisik, then maybe the Empire wasn't as mighty as they thought. "Take him to the prison level," Taejo ordered. "The Earth leaders must see what happens to those who defy us." As the guards grabbed Han's arms, he spoke one word into the small device hidden in his collar. "Now." Instantly, the lights in the arena went out. Confusion swept through the crowd. When emergency lights came on seconds later, everyone froze in shock. Through the huge windows of the Daisik ship, they could see dozens of Earth ships that had appeared from nowhere. They surrounded the alien vessel completely. "What is this?" Taejo demanded. Han smiled. "You didn't think Earth would trust you, did you? While I was fighting your champion, our ships were moving into position. They'd been watching and waiting." "Impossible," Taejo said. "Our sensors would have detected them." "Not these ships," Han replied. "We've been studying your technology since you arrived. Dr. Ju found a way to hide from your sensors." The guards holding Han looked at their king, waiting for orders. Taejo's face darkened with rage. "It doesn't matter," he said. "Your primitive ships are no match for the Empire." As if in answer, a voice came over the Daisik communication system. It was Dr. Ju. "King Taejo," she said, "we have surrounded your ship with 30 vessels. Each one carries a device targeted at your engine core. Your shields cannot stop these weapons. Release Captain Han now, or we will fire." The Daisik crowd murmured in fear. Even Taijo looked uncertain. "You're bluffing," he said. "Humans don't have such technology." "We didn't," Han agreed, "until we studied yours. You gave us access to your ship for the trials." "That was a mistake." One of the Dasik officials hurried to the king's side and whispered something. Taijo's 3 eyes widened. "Our sensors have detected unusual energy signatures from the Earth ships," the official announced. "They appear to be weapon systems of advanced design." Taijo's hands shook with anger. "This was your plan all along, to trick us?" "No," Han said. "I hoped you would honor our agreement, but we prepared for the possibility that you wouldn't." On the screens, the Earth leaders watched with held breath. They had known about the backup plan, but still feared what might happen. Taijo looked at the human ships surrounding his vessel, then at his own people watching him. He faced a choice: risk everything or admit defeat. "Release him," he finally ordered. The guards let go of Han. He rubbed his arms where they had gripped him. "Earth remains free," Taijo said, his voice cold. "But the Dasik Empire will remember this humiliation." Han nodded. "And we will remember that agreements with the Dasik cannot be trusted." As he walked toward the exit, Han passed Ryuk. The alien champion bowed his head slightly. "You fought with honor," Ryuk said quietly. "More than can be said for some." Han returned the nod. Perhaps not all Dasik were like their king. As Han boarded the small ship that would take him back to Earth, he looked once more at the angry face of King Taijo. The alien ruler had made a serious mistake. He had challenged a human, and now he was facing consequences he never expected. Earth had won more than just the 3 trials. It had won respect in the stars. 3 months after the challenge, Earth had changed. Humans now knew they were not alone in the universe. They also knew they could stand up to even the strongest alien powers. Han sat in a meeting room at the newly built Galactic Relations Center in Seoul. Through the windows, he could see the city where he grew up. It looked the same, but the people walking its streets were different now, more confident, more united. The door opened, and Dr. Ju entered. She smiled at Han. "They're ready for you," she said. Han nodded and stood up. He wore a formal uniform with a new symbol on the chest, Earth's mark in the stars. They walked together to the main chamber. Inside, representatives from 12 alien species sat around a large table. Most were new to Earth, coming forward after hearing how humans had stood up to the Dasik Empire. At the far end of the table sat a Dasik, but not King Taijo. This was Eun, a female Dasik who now led the new Dasik Council. After the challenge, many in the Empire had questioned Taijo's leadership. When the truth of his dishonor spread, his own people had removed him from power. "Captain Han," Eun said, nodding her head in respect. "We are ready to sign the treaty." Han took his seat at the table. Before him lay a document that would change history, a peace agreement between Earth and the other worlds of the galaxy. "Before we begin," said a small green alien from a world called Prath, "we would like to understand how humans defeated the Dasik. Your kind is physically weaker than most species here." Han looked around the table. Each alien was different. Some had multiple eyes, some had scales instead of skin, some breathed through gills. But they all watched him with the same question. "Humans have never been the strongest," Han explained. "On our own world, we weren't the fastest or the biggest animals. We don't have natural weapons like claws or sharp teeth, but we survived because we adapt. We observe, we learn, and we work together." He looked at Eun. The Dasik Empire made 2 mistakes. First, they thought physical strength was the only kind of strength that mattered. Second, they broke their word. Eun lowered her 3 eyes. "The old ways of conquest are ending. The Dasik are learning that honor and cooperation bring more benefits than force." One by one, the representatives signed the treaty. Earth would join the galactic community as an equal, not as a conquered world. After the ceremony, Han walked outside for a moment of quiet. The night sky was clear, and he could see stars shining above. Somewhere out there was Taijo, exiled to a small outpost on the edge of what had been his empire. Captain Han. Han turned to see Ryuk standing behind him. The former champion looked different now. He wore simple clothes, not battle armor, and his stance was relaxed, not threatening. "Commander Ryuk," Han said, "I didn't know you were here. I am part of Ian's security team now," Ryuk explained. "I asked to come to Earth. I wanted to see the world that produced a warrior like you." Han smiled. "And what do you think of our planet?" "It is beautiful," Ryuk admitted. "Different from our world, but good in its own way. Like your people." They stood in silence for a moment, looking at the stars. "Taijo asks about you," Ryuk said finally. "He still doesn't understand how he lost everything." "What do you tell him?" Han asked. "That he challenged a human," Ryuk said. "And humans are the most dangerous species in the galaxy because they don't know they can't win." Han laughed. "Is that what you think of us?" Ryuk's mouth curved in what Han now recognized as a smile. "I think humans change the rules when they don't like the game, and that makes you dangerous and valuable friends." As they walked back inside, Han thought about how much had changed. One challenge had opened the stars to humanity, and humans were ready to rise. The galaxy would never be the same again. The end.